The silence was deafening. You know that moment, when you're standing in your own home, and you realize, everyone you trusted, just tried to destroy you? That's where I was. 3 weeks ago. My phone was buzzing. Constantly. Text after text, from family members who had spent the last 6 months, telling me I was worthless. Telling me I'd never amount to anything. Telling me I should just disappear. But now? Now they were begging. Please, Sarah, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. You're being dramatic, as usual. I set my phone down, on the kitchen counter of the house they didn't know I owned. The house they thought belonged to someone else. The house where they had planned to celebrate my complete humiliation. See, my family, they're what you'd call old money. Not billionaires, but comfortable. Comfortable enough to look down on anyone who didn't inherit their way to success. Comfortable enough to make sure I knew I didn't belong. For 28 years. I let them treat me like the family disappointment. The black sheep. The one who just couldn't get her life together. But 3 weeks ago, I got my life together in a way they never saw coming. The locks had been changed that morning. Professional grade. The kind you can't pick, you can't break, you can't bypass. And when 37 members of my extended family showed up for what they thought was going to be my public execution, they couldn't get in. I watched from the security cameras as my mother pounded on the door. As my uncle tried to climb through windows that wouldn't budge. As my cousins called me every name in the book. But the best part? The absolute best part? They still didn't know that I was watching. They still didn't know that I owned everything they were trying to break into. They still didn't know that for the past 2 years, I had been 3 steps ahead of every single thing they tried to do to me. And they definitely didn't know about the surprise I had waiting for them when they finally gave up and went home. My name is Sarah. And this is the story of how I took down an entire family using nothing but patience, intelligence, and the one thing they never thought I had. Money. More money than they could ever imagine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up watching my family lose their minds on my front porch, you need to know how this all started. And trust me, it started long before 3 weeks ago. My family, they're what therapists would call textbook narcissists. But back then, I just called them family. The Hendersons. That's our last name. And if you lived in Westchester County, you knew that name. My grandfather built a small empire in real estate. Nothing flashy, but enough to buy respect in the right circles. My mother, Patricia, never worked a day in her life. But she had opinions about everyone who did. My father, Richard, inherited 3 properties, and somehow convinced himself he was a business genius. My older brother, Michael, well, he was the golden child. Harvard MBA, married to a lawyer, 2 kids who went to private school. And then, there was me. I was different from day one. While Michael played tennis, I read books. While he networked at country clubs, I studied computer programming in my room. While he dated girls from good families, I didn't date much at all. This, apparently, was a problem. I remember. I was 12 years old when my mother first told me I was an embarrassment. We were at my cousin Emma's birthday party. You know those parties where the adults drink wine and pretend their children are angels while the kids run wild. I was sitting in the corner, reading a Nancy Drew book, when my Aunt Linda walked over. She looked at me, then looked at my mother, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Patricia, what's wrong with Sarah? Why doesn't she play with the other children?" My mother, she didn't defend me. She didn't say, "Sarah's just different." She didn't say, "Leave my daughter alone." Instead, she sighed deeply and said, "I honestly don't know what I did wrong with this one. This one. Like I was defective merchandise. Like I was a failed experiment." The other adults, they laughed. Not mean laughter, but that polite, uncomfortable laughter that adults do when someone says something they know they shouldn't agree with, but secretly do. I kept reading my book. But inside, something broke that day. Something that took me 16 years to fix. High school was worse. While Michael was student body president, I was invisible. My parents went to every single one of his football games. They threw him a massive graduation party. They bragged about his scholarship to Harvard to anyone who would listen. When I graduated, valedictorian, with a full ride to MIT, my mother's exact words were, "Well, at least you're good at something." College was my escape. For years, where nobody knew I was the disappointment Henderson. For years, where I could just be Sarah. Smart Sarah. Funny Sarah. Sarah who started 3 different tech clubs and graduated summa cum laude. But the day I came home with my computer science degree, my father looked at it for exactly 3 seconds and said, "That's nice, sweetheart. But when are you going to find a real job? You know, something respectable. A real job." Like my degree from MIT was just an expensive piece of paper. That's when I realized it didn't matter what I accomplished. It didn't matter how smart I was, how hard I worked, how much I achieved. In their eyes, I would always be the broken one. But here's the thing they never understood about the broken one. I was listening to everything. Every conversation they thought I wasn't smart enough to follow. Every business deal they discussed at family dinners. Every financial problem they whispered about when they thought I was in my room. I was taking notes. Mental notes about who owed money to whom. About which properties were actually profitable. About which family members were living beyond their means. And slowly, very slowly, I started to see the cracks in their perfect facade. My Uncle David? The one who drove the BMW and lived in the mansion? He was 3 months behind on his mortgage. My cousin Jennifer? The one with the designer clothes and the perfect Instagram? She had $60,000 in credit card debt. My parents? The ones who looked down on me for not having a real job? They had been borrowing money from my grandfather's trust for years. Nobody knew I knew this. Nobody knew that I had spent my entire childhood invisible in the corner, learning exactly how their world really worked. And nobody knew that I had been spending the last 2 years after college not looking for their approval, but building something they couldn't even comprehend. Let me know in the comments where you are watching this video from. I'd love to know if you've ever had family that made you feel like you weren't good enough. Because what happened next changed everything. The invitation came on a Tuesday. My mother called me at exactly 2:15 p.m. I know the exact time because I was in the middle of a video conference with investors from Silicon Valley. Investors who were very interested in the app one had been building for the past 18 months. But of course, my mother didn't know that. "Sarah, darling," she said in that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "I have wonderful news." I muted my laptop and braced myself. In my family, wonderful news usually meant terrible news for me. "Your cousin Emma, you remember Emma, she's getting engaged." Emma. Perfect Emma, with the perfect job, at the perfect law firm, marrying the perfect man, with the perfect trust fund. Of course she was. "That's great, Mom. Send her my congratulations." "Oh, but Sarah, there's more. The family has decided to throw her an engagement party. A big one. This Saturday, at the estate." The estate. That's what they called my grandfather's old house. The one that had been sitting empty for 3 years since he died. The one that everyone assumed would eventually go to my Uncle David, since he was the eldest son. The one that, legally, belonged to me. But I'll get to that later. "Saturday works," I said, still watching my investors wait patiently on the screen. "I'll be there." "Wonderful. Now, Sarah." Her voice changed. Became more serious. "I need to talk to you about something important." Here it comes, I thought. The real reason for the call. "Your father and we've been talking. And we think it's time you heard some hard truths." I could hear my father, in the background, telling her to just say it. "Sarah, you're 28 years old. And frankly, you're not where you should be in life. You don't have a career, you don't have a relationship, you don't have anything to show for yourself." I looked at my computer screen. At the investors, who had just offered me $2.3 million for a 30% stake in my company. "I see," I said quietly. "So we've decided this engagement party is going to be an intervention. The whole family will be there, and we're going to help you figure out your next steps." An intervention. For my successful life. What kind of next steps were you thinking? "Well, your Uncle David knows someone at his accounting firm. It's entry level, but it's a start. And your cousin Michael, he thinks you might benefit from some therapy. You know, to work on your attitude problem." "My attitude problem." "Right. And Sarah," my mother continued, "we think it's time you moved back home. Just temporarily, until you get back on your feet. Your father already cleared out the garage. We can set up a bed out there." The garage. They wanted to put me in the garage. "Mom," I said slowly. "I appreciate the concern. But I'm doing fine." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Sarah, sweetheart, you're living in that tiny apartment, working God knows what kind of job, you never talk about your work, you never bring anyone home, honey, you're not fine. You're lost." Lost. That was their word for anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success. "I'll see you Saturday," I said. "Good. And Sarah? Wear something nice. First impressions matter." She hung up. I unmuted my laptop and looked at the 3 investors who had been waiting patiently. "Sorry about that," I said. "Family call." "No problem," said Jennifer, the lead investor. "So, do we have a deal?" I looked at the contract on my screen. $2.3 million for an app that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their finances. An app that I had built from scratch in my tiny apartment while my family assumed I was doing nothing. We have a deal, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous about the money. Not because I was worried about the business. But because I kept thinking about that garage. About how my mother had already decided where I belonged. About how my father had already cleared it out. About how they had planned an entire intervention without asking me if I needed one. And that's when I realized Saturday wasn't going to be an engagement party. It was going to be a public execution. Mine. They were going to gather the entire family, 37 people, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, and they were going to take turns, telling me everything that was wrong with my life. They were going to humiliate me. Systematically. Completely. In front of everyone, whose opinion they thought mattered. And then, they were going to offer me their solution. The garage. The entry-level job. The therapy to fix my attitude problem. They were going to break me down. Until I had no choice but to accept their version of who I should be. But here's what they didn't know. I had stopped caring about their approval 2 years ago. I had stopped needing their validation the day I realized I was smarter than all of them combined. And I had definitely stopped being the helpless little girl who sat in the corner reading books while they laughed at her. Saturday was going to be an intervention. But not the kind they were expecting. Before I tell you what I did next, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Because trust me, what happens next is going to blow your mind. Saturday arrived like a storm. I spent the morning getting ready. Not for their intervention, but for mine. I put on my best black dress, the one I had bought for investor meetings. I did my makeup carefully. I styled my hair perfectly. I looked successful, professional, confident. Everything they said. I wasn't. The drive to the estate took 30 minutes. 30 minutes to rehearse what I was going to say. 30 minutes to make sure I had every document, every piece of evidence, every single bomb I was about to drop. I pulled into the circular driveway at exactly 3 p.m. The party was already in full swing. I could see, through the massive windows, 37 family members, drinking wine, eating catered food, in the house that legally belonged to me. I sat in my car for 5 minutes. Just breathing. Just preparing. Then I got out, walked to the front door, and used my key. The key they didn't know I had. The conversation stopped immediately. 37 faces turned to stare at me. Some surprised, some annoyed, some already preparing their speeches about my life choices. Sarah, my mother called out, in that fake cheerful voice. You made it. Come in, we have so much to discuss. I walked into the living room, where everyone had gathered. The same room, where I used to hide, behind the couch, reading books, while they talked about important things. But today, I wasn't hiding. Actually, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I have something to discuss with all of you. My Uncle David stepped forward. The unofficial head of the family since my grandfather died. The one who drove the BMW and lived in the mansion and owed 3 months on his mortgage. Sarah, we're glad you're here. Your mother told us about the intervention we planned. We think it's time for some honest conversation about your future. Honest conversation. Right. You're absolutely right, Uncle David. It is time for honest conversation. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. Thick. Full of papers that were about to change everything. But first, I have a question. How many of you know who actually owns this house? The room went quiet. Confused quiet. My father stepped forward. Sarah, what are you talking about? This is the family estate. It belongs to, well, it will belong to David once the will is probated. I smiled. For the first time in 3 weeks. I actually smiled. Actually. Dad, the will was probated 2 years ago. And according to grandfather's will, which was very specific, this house, along with the other 2 properties, and the investment portfolio, belongs to me. The silence was deafening. That's ridiculous, my Aunt Linda said. Your grandfather would never leave everything to. She stopped. Mid-sentence. Because she realized what she was about to say. What she was about to admit, in front of everyone. To the disappointment? I finished, for her. To the black sheep? To the one with no future? I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. The will. Notarized. Legal. Ironclad. Grandfather left everything to the grandchild who showed the most promise in business and technology. The one who, and I quote, understood the future better than the past. I held up the will so everyone could see it. My name, highlighted in yellow. He left me this house. The rental property in downtown White Plains. The vacation home in the Hamptons. And $4.7 million in various investments. My mother's face went white. Actually white. Like all the blood just drained out of her head. But that's not the best part, I continued. The best part is what I did with that inheritance. I pulled out the second document. A bank statement. With a balance that made several people literally gasp. I took that $4.7 million and I built a company. An app that just got bought by a Silicon Valley firm for $12.3 million. The room was spinning. I could see it in their faces. The confusion, the disbelief, the slow realization that everything they thought they knew was wrong. So let me get this straight, I said, walking closer to the group. You all came here, to my house, to tell me about my failures. You came here to offer me a bed in the garage. You came here to fix my attitude problem. I paused. Let that sink in. Completely. But here's what's really funny. David, you owe $63,000 on your mortgage. Jennifer, you have $87,000 in credit card debt. Michael, your perfect Harvard MBA husband, just got laid off and hasn't told his wife yet. One by one. I looked at each of them. And one by one. I watched their faces as they realized. I knew everything. Mom. Dad, you've been borrowing money from what you thought was grandfather's trust fund. Except there is no trust fund anymore. Because it's mine now. And the checks you've been cashing for the past 6 months, those came from my personal account. My father actually staggered. Like he had been hit with a physical blow. I've been paying for your lifestyle for 6 months. while you planned this intervention. While you told everyone I was a failure. While you cleared out your garage for your disappointment daughter. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. But was probably only seconds. Finally, my mother spoke. Her voice, barely a whisper. Sarah, we didn't know, we thought. You thought what you wanted to think. You saw what you wanted to see. You never asked about my life. You never wondered why I could afford my own apartment. You never questioned why I seemed so calm about your disapproval. I closed the folder. Put it back in my purse. So here's what's going to happen. This intervention is over. This party is over. And all of you need to leave. Now. Sarah. My Uncle David started. Surely we can discuss. No, I said firmly. We can't. Because you see, this house is mine. And I want you, all of you, to leave. But the party. Emma said, her perfect engagement party, falling apart, in real time. Emma, congratulations on your engagement. But your party is in my house. Without my permission. So, it's over. I walked to the front door, and opened it wide. Everyone out. Now. And one by one, 37 family members, who had come to fix me, walked out of my house, in complete and total silence. The aftermath was swift. And brutal. I watched from my living room window, as 37 people got into their cars, and drove away. Some were crying. Some were angry. Some were just stunned. But they all left. Every single one. I poured myself a glass of wine, from the bottle they had brought, for Emma's engagement party, and I sat down, in the silence of my own house. My phone started ringing within an hour. The first call was from my mother. Sarah, we need to talk. This is all a huge misunderstanding. We had no idea about the inheritance. If you had just told us. I let it go to voicemail. The second call was from my Uncle David. Sarah. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we could discuss this like adults. I'm sure we can work something out. Voicemail. The third call was from my brother Michael. Sarah, what the hell is wrong with you? Do you have any idea what you just did to this family? Call me back, right now. Delete. But the texts were even better. My Aunt Linda sent 17 messages in the span of 2 hours. I'm going to read you a few of them exactly as she wrote them. Sarah, this is ridiculous. You can't just kick out the entire family. We raised you. We loved you. This is not how we treat family. You're being vindictive and cruel. Your grandfather would be ashamed of how you're acting. Money doesn't give you the right to be heartless. Please call me. We can fix this. You don't understand what you're doing to everyone. Some people are really struggling right now and you're just being selfish. Selfish. I was being selfish. My cousin Jennifer tried a different approach. She sent me one long text that was basically emotional blackmail. Sarah, I know we haven't always been close, but I'm begging you to reconsider. My credit card debt is real and I'm drowning. I made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix them. The family has always been there for each other and right now I really need help. Please don't let money come between us. We're blood. Blood. Right. The same blood that had spent 28 years telling me I wasn't good enough. But the best text came from Emma. Poor Emma, whose perfect engagement party had just imploded. Sarah, I don't understand what just happened. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life and you ruined it. Everyone is upset and confused and my fiancé's family thinks we're all crazy. I know you're mad at everyone, but why did you have to take it out on me? I never did anything to you. I always tried to include you. This is so unfair. Always tried to include me. Like that time, when we were 16, and she told everyone at her birthday party that I was probably going to end up a cat lady. I turned my phone off and went to bed. Monday morning. I woke up to 3 legal documents that had been slipped under my front door. The first was from my Uncle David's lawyer. A formal request to contest my grandfather's will, claiming undue influence and mental incapacity at the time the will was written. I laughed. Actually laughed. Out loud. My grandfather had been a lawyer himself for 43 years. The will was airtight. And I had medical records proving he was completely sound when he wrote it. The second document was a cease and desist letter from my parents' attorney, demanding that I stop making false claims about their financial situation and threatening defamation charges. False claims. Even though I had bank records proving every word I said. The third document was the most interesting. A formal eviction notice addressed to me, claiming that I was illegally occupying the family estate. They were trying to evict me from my own house. I called my lawyer that afternoon. James Morrison, the same attorney who had helped me set up my company. James, I said, I need you to send some responses to these documents. What kind of responses? He asked. The kind that remind them I own everything, and they own nothing. Within 24 hours, James had sent 3 responses. To David's lawyer, a copy of the will, plus documentation of my grandfather's mental competency, plus a countersuit for harassment. To my parents' attorney, copies of all their financial records that I had access to as the heir to my grandfather's estate, plus documentation of every loan I had given them, plus a demand for immediate repayment. To whoever sent the eviction notice, a deed proving my ownership, plus a restraining order request preventing anyone from entering my property without permission. But I wasn't done. Not even close. See, when you inherit a real estate portfolio, you also inherit all the contracts and agreements and rental arrangements that come with it, including the mortgage on my Uncle David's house. My grandfather had been David's private lender for his mansion. David thought he was borrowing money from a bank. But actually, he had been borrowing from my grandfather's investment company. Which meant David's mortgage now belonged to me. And David was 3 months behind on payments. On Tuesday, David received a formal notice of default on his mortgage. He had 30 days to pay $47,000 in back payments and fees, or face foreclosure. On Wednesday, Jennifer received a letter from a collections agency that I had hired to recover the money she owed on credit cards that my grandfather had co-signed. On Thursday, my parents received a bill for $83,000, representing all the loans I had given them over the past 6 months, with interest and a 30-day payment deadline. By Friday, my phone was ringing nonstop. But this time, the tone was different. This time, they weren't angry. They weren't demanding. They weren't trying to fix me. They were begging. Sarah, please, we're family. Sarah, this will destroy us. Sarah, we're sorry, we made mistakes, but this is too much. Too much. After 28 years of being told I was worthless, asking for basic respect was too much. I didn't answer any of the calls. I didn't respond to any of the texts. I didn't acknowledge any of their pleas. Instead, I did something they never expected. I disappeared. I moved to California. Not because I was running away, but because that's where my new company was headquartered. That's where my investors wanted me to be. That's where my actual life was waiting. The life I had built while they thought I was doing nothing. 6 months later, I got a letter forwarded from my old address by the postal service. The return address was my mother's handwriting. I almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. Expensive stationery. The kind my mother used for important occasions. It read, "Dear Sarah, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We realize now that we made mistakes. We see now that we never really understood you. We would like the chance to start over. To get to know the real Sarah. The successful Sarah. We're proud of you, and we hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Love, Mom and Dad." Proud of me. Now that I had $12.3 million, they were proud of me. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Not because I was saving it, but because I wanted to remember exactly how it felt to finally be good enough. The truth is, I don't hate my family. Hate takes too much energy. And I'm too busy building a life that actually makes me happy to waste time on people who only love the successful version of who I am. My Uncle David lost his house. He moved into a 2-bedroom apartment and got a job selling insurance. He's fine. Not thriving, but fine. My cousin Jennifer declared bankruptcy. She moved back in with her parents and started seeing a financial counselor. She's learning to live within her means. For the first time in her adult life, my parents sold their house. They moved into a smaller place, and my father went back to work. At 72 years old, he got a job at a consulting firm. They're learning what it means to earn their lifestyle instead of inheriting it. Emma had a beautiful wedding. Smaller than planned, because the engagement party had been such a disaster, but beautiful nonetheless. She sent me an invitation. I didn't go, but I sent a gift. A nice gift. Because her engagement party wasn't really about her. It was about everyone else trying to fix me. As for me, I'm doing exactly what I always wanted to do. I'm building things. Creating things. Solving problems that actually matter. I have a team of 12 employees who respect my ideas because the ideas are good. Not because I'm related to them. I bought a house in Palo Alto. It's smaller than the estate, but it's mine. Every inch, every decision, every piece of furniture, chosen by me, for me. I have friends now, who don't know anything about my family, or my inheritance, or my trust fund. They know me as Sarah the entrepreneur. Sarah the problem solver. Sarah, who worked her way from nothing to something. Which is technically true. I did work my way from nothing to something. It's just that the nothing wasn't money. The nothing was self-respect. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my family had just accepted me. If they had celebrated my successes instead of ignoring them. If they had asked me about my life instead of assuming I didn't have one. But then I remember the garage. The intervention. The way they looked at me like I was damaged goods. And I realize their rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it forced me to stop seeking their approval and start building my own life. A life where success is measured by the problems you solve, not the people you impress. A life where your worth comes from what you create, not what you inherit. A life where family is the people who choose to love you, not the people who happen to share your DNA. I'm 30 years old now. I have everything I ever wanted. A successful company, financial freedom, and most importantly, the knowledge that I am enough. Just as I am. My family, they're still out there. Still trying to figure out how they missed what was right in front of them. Still wondering how the disappointment became the success story. But that's their puzzle to solve. Not mine. I have bigger problems to work on. Better things to build. And a life that finally belongs to me. The garage is still empty. But I'm not waiting for permission to leave it anymore. I already did. If you liked this story, check out this other one on the screen. A story about what happens when the quiet kid in school becomes the boss of everyone who bullied them. See you there.